A lot of people were like, oh my God, I gotta try this out because Cindy rated it 5 stars, so it must be good. And then there are some people who actually did try it out and then they didn't like it. And they're like, man, why did Cindy recommend this? Bitch, I never recommended it to you, okay? I only gave it 5 stars because I'm a simple bitch. Every once in a while, I get a few comments saying, why don't you pick up books that you actually like? Why do you only read books that you hate? Why do you do this to yourself? I do regularly read books that I like. You just don't know that because you only click on my most popular videos and they happen to be the ones where I'm ranting about a book. But that's not on me. That's on you. I always talk about books that I like, but nobody clicks on them. Is anyone even going to click on this one? I don't even know. I want to talk about the best books that I read in 2019. When I say best, I don't mean objectively best. I just mean all the books that I rated 5 stars or all the books that I really enjoyed. I toss all kinds of ratings at all kinds of books, and some of them don't even make any sense. I thought it might be fun to take a look at all of the books that I rated 5 stars, but I also want to mention a few runner-ups of books that I still really like. In total, there were 8 books that I rated 5 stars this year. I'm gonna go in order of most credible to least credible. And what I mean by that is there are some books that I gave 5 stars because they are truly that good. And then there are some books that I just gave 5 stars for like the hell of it. Again, shit doesn't make sense over here. Take everything that I say with a grain of salt. There are 2 books that have really stood out to me. They are both memoirs. The most recent one that I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to her on audiobook and it was so good. She details growing up in the South Side of Chicago, to becoming a lawyer, to having a midlife crisis, to quitting her lawyer job to join a nonprofit instead, and then meeting Barack Obama, and then dealing with the crazy shit that happens when you are the first Black lady of the United States. I loved going through that whole journey with her. I loved hearing about her philosophy, about life, and about how certain demographics don't get the right opportunities. She tries really hard to keep optimism and hope during a really bleak time. If you are a woman of color living in the US, I think that it would especially resonate with you. And now I gotta ask myself every day, what would Michelle Obama do? For one thing, she would probably take a shower before she started this video, but now it's too late and I gotta commit. The other memoir that I really liked was Educated by Tara Westover. The author grew up in the mountains of Idaho with this fucking crazy ass redneck family that didn't believe in school or modern medicine. So she literally never went to school. She never went to a hospital. She worked in her father's junkyard the whole time. She was just like a hick. Her brothers are beating the shit out of each other, and then she grows up and she's like, wait a minute, this shit ain't normal. She begins to teach herself basic math and grammar skills, and eventually she ends up in Harvard and Cambridge, which is fucking amazing. I went to school growing up and I still flunked calculus, so I don't know how that bitch did it. Her whole story about expanding her worldview and educating herself both literally and figuratively is really inspiring. It's not even about formal education either. She really had to go through a huge cultural shift because she would go to college and that bitch wouldn't even bathe because she was so used to living in a hick redneck family, never washed her hands and shit. She'll be sitting in class and she's like, what's the Holocaust? And everyone's like, bitch, are you serious right now? Like, this is a kind of book where if you come from a toxic family or you had a rough childhood or a rough upbringing, this is the inspiring shit that is nice to see because this woman was able to define herself outside of her bubble and outside of the limitations that her family had set upon her. It's proof that even if you come from a dysfunctional family, you don't have to be trapped in your circumstances and you can seek a better life for yourself. I realize now that I totally love memoirs about strong women that have a rags to riches story because that's the kind of shit that I want to manifest in my life too. Right now, I'm the old Tara Westover who isn't taking a shower, but I want to be the new Tara Westover who is fit for civilization. So I'm going to do that after I film this video, I promise. I'm really glad you can't smell through the camera right now. The third book that I rated 5 stars is technically a webcomic. The story is about a young girl who is fleeing from Vietnam as an asylum seeker. She is on a boat with a bunch of other refugees. A lot of people are dying and sick, and she is just hoping to make it through to try to have a better life for herself. The story wasn't necessarily mind-blowing, but what really stood out to me is the production quality of the webcomic. If this were a story that was written traditionally, I probably would have rated it 3 stars because it's not enough to get you emotionally attached to the characters or fully understand in the context of the historical setting, but the way that the webcomic was executed made it so freaking good. As you scroll down, there are all these little details like having the comic panels tilt back and forth across the screen to show how the boat is shaking, or seeing how the artwork of a human being shrivels up as you scroll down to imply that this person is starving to death. Everything was super well thought out to really make it feel like you are in this claustrophobic setting that's totally miserable, depressing ass shit. As you hear people dying and crying around you, it's not a good time, and that's why I rated it 5 stars. It's not for everyone. I just think that if you come from a design background or if you are an artist, you would be the type of person that would appreciate the craft of how this story was put together. The next book that I rated 5 stars was Freelance and Business and Stuff, which is a guide for creatives who are interested in freelancing. So this is the type of book where I'm not like fangirling over it and I'm not obsessive over it like how I would with fiction books, and we'll get to that in a bit. I read a lot of self-help books and a lot of them are not that good. This one is a good example for something that provides actionable advice, is clearly organized, that is composed into a step-by-step guide. It's like a litmus test to see if you have what it takes to do this freelance thing for real. And it made me realize, no, I cannot. I'm too stupid to do that. But I wouldn't have realized that if I hadn't read that book. Now I understand how much brain power it takes to actually start a business. So I'm like, no thank you. The 5th book that I really enjoyed was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. This is a retelling of Frankenstein as told through Elizabeth's perspective. From the original tale, Elizabeth didn't really have much of a role. In this book, you could really see what was going on in her head the whole time. And what was interesting is that she actually purposefully put on the role of a subservient woman. A lot of times in abusive relationships, the victim has to make themselves smaller in order to appease to the abuser. And that is exactly the kind of dynamic that you see as she grows up with Victor. She was an orphan child and she was given away to the Frankenstein family because their son was a fucking weirdo and they thought that it would be better if he had friends. And so she was brought to him literally as a supporting character for his story, literally just to develop his narrative. And she knew that she had to continue playing this role because if she didn't, she would have nothing. She would be thrown out on the streets, abandoned by the family. It was how a bitch survived in 18th century Europe. It was such a fascinating way to add more depth to her character, and it did a good job in portraying a toxic relationship as well and the codependency that they have on each other. The pacing can be pretty slow, so if you're not into that, then don't go for it. But if you really like seeing character studies and you like seeing how relationships are portrayed, this book was good. And then the next 3 books I saved for last because I really just rated them 5 stars for the fluff aspect. The first one is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a historical romance with a mythological twist because it is about the goddess of love. At trial, she had an affair with the god of war and she must prove to the court why love and war keep on banging. She proves this by telling a story that takes place in World War I about these 2 pairs of lovers, 4 central characters. They all fall in love with each other, and you know, it's some cheesy ass bullshit, but I loved it anyway. I just love romance stories that take place during a really fucking depressing time period because it's like you see the hope in such a dreary moment in history, and that's some good shit. But the cherry on top was that the author really put in a lot of care and effort into the research of the people that existed during World War I. She did research about women's role during the Great War and the African American soldiers that helped contribute to fighting alongside with the white soldiers and would get discriminated even though they're on the same side. I loved that she was able to spotlight those characters and they were all very endearing. I do think the romance was like kind of rushed. It's very cheesy, and if you're not like into romance, you probably won't like it, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. I cried 7 times on an airplane because I read this during my flight. I made my neighbors very uncomfortable, but that's just how it be. And then the next fluffy book that I rated 5 stars was Enchantment of Ravens. This is the kind of book that a lot of people were like, oh my god, I gotta try this out because Cindy rated it 5 stars, so it must be good. And then there are some people who actually did try it out and then they didn't like it. And they're like, man, why did Cindy recommend this? Bitch, I never recommended it to you, okay? I only gave it 5 stars because I'm a simple bitch. This is a fairy tale story about a girl who is a prodigy painter. She has a dangerous set of clients who are fairies, and they are dangerous because these are immortal beings that could fucking finesse you. Like, they can manipulate you and make you do dangerous shit, so they cannot be trusted at all. So one day she gets a client, and he is a fairy prince that asks her to draw a portrait of him, and so she does. They have insta love. This is one of the complaints that a lot of people had about the book, but I kind of saw it as infatuation, and then later that would develop into actual love. But in the beginning, it was insta love, because at first it was like some cutesy bullshit. And then later, after she sends over the portrait, the fairy gets mad at her because she actually drew sorrow in his eyes, which is a bad thing because now all the other fairies know that he's a pussy. So he snatches her up to go to the court so she can be set on trial. And so that's when she's like, wait a minute, this guy's kind of an asshole. And so they go on this adventure together, and the adventure drags on for a very long time. This is another thing that people had a complaint about because they kind of just meandered, nowhere. But along the way, they fall in love. And really, that's all I care about. Again, I am a simple hoe. I never recommended this book. I just happened to give it 5 stars because I felt like it. I just thought the characters were super cute. I thought it was a fluffy story. If you just want to be a simple hoe and enjoy like a cute, fluffy story, and you don't want to be critical about the plot or anything, just sit back, relax, enjoy a simple fairy tale story, and that's it. But don't be mad at me if you don't like it, okay? Because I never said that I had good taste. The last one I'm saving for last because I don't even know if it deserves 5 stars. It was How to Make Friends with a Ghost. This is a picture book, and honestly, it's exactly how you see it. The art style is really cute. The story is very simple. It's for children. I don't know what else to say about it. The advice about how to make friends with a ghost was pretty creative. I don't know. I need to increase my average Goodreads rating. It's just cute and quirky, and why not give it 5 stars? I want to mention some runner-ups of books that I really, really enjoyed. I just didn't give them 5 stars for whatever reason, but I still think they're pretty damn good. The number one book that I think is the most underrated one out of everything that I've read is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This is a sci-fi book about a young Black girl who is autistic. She lives in the low-deck slums of a spaceship that is basically organized to be like the antebellum South. They actively oppress the darker skinned passengers, like the main character, and view them as less than human. There were some pacing issues with this, but I still really, really like the ideas and the concepts behind this. I love it when there are genres like sci-fi or fantasy that take place in a different universe or a different world, but they parallel issues that we have today. It was super interesting that the concept of gender identity was explored in a sci-fi setting too. It's like a very subtle way of dehumanizing someone, even if it's not physically shown. There definitely is like a lot of physical violence, so you get the best of both worlds. It was very fascinating to explore all of those little dynamics with gender and race and colorism and even autism. I think it was a very ambitious attempt for a debut novel. I am definitely planning on reading the rest of their books as they keep on writing. Another book that I enjoyed was called Make Time. This is a nonfiction book on how to focus on what matters. Not spending your whole fucking life just dedicated to your job or getting all these errands done and never making time for your passion projects or your family or whatever else that you value. If we live our lives so passively like that, it really sucks because then we're just on autopilot the whole time. It's always a good reminder to redefine productivity so that it's not based on how busy you are all the time, all the busy work that we put on ourselves as if it's like an accomplishment. Really, it's more like, how do you want to spend your time? Like, what do you want to do with your life? It's just a good reminder to just make time for shit that matters. On a similar note, there was another nonfiction book that I read called Proposals for the Feminine Economy. This is a super short book. It's more like a manifesto. It's not really like a self-help guide or a hard-hitting economics book or anything, but it's similar in the sense that it's a nice reminder to redefine something that is so ingrained in your brain and adjust it so that it suits more to something that is true to you. We view a lot of power structures in a masculine way. What if we focused it on nourishment instead and other traditionally feminine qualities that are often seen as inferior, but use it as a way of strength? I like that it strips away this idea of being this cold, abrasive businesswoman. The next book that I really enjoyed was To Kill a Kingdom. It's a standalone novel, thank fucking God, because I'm tired of fantasy series that have like 7 books. This is a retelling of The Little Mermaid. The main character is a siren, and then the prince character is actually a siren killer. She loses her siren capabilities, and then she turns into a human. She must seduce the prince and steal his heart in order to become a siren once again. The protagonists fucking hate each other, and I love it. I usually don't like enemies to lovers trope, but this one, it was done pretty well. I loved their banter. The adventure was really fun to read. It also doesn't bog you down with a bunch of extraneous information either. If you want to be introduced to fantasy without the fear of being bogged down, this is a very simple standalone book. I also enjoyed Full-Time You by Meg Lewis for similar reasons as I enjoyed the other 2 nonfiction books. This is a workbook about career development and finding out what are the things that you value the most in life and what are your unique strengths that you can turn into a career. I made my workplace buy this book for me before I quit my workplace and went to my new job. So I guess it worked. She tries to guide you through the different ways for you to identify your strengths and what makes you different from other people and how you can translate those unique qualities into a career that is tailored for you. I want to reserve this last section for books that I think are good. They just weren't for me, but I want to mention them anyway because maybe they might be for you. The next 2 books I am gonna recommend are for the intellectual bitches out there. The first book is Her Body and Other Parties. This is a collection of short stories. There's a lot of female and female relationships, but that's like not the focus of the story. It just happens to be an element of the story as you read all this fucked up shit that's happening. It's kind of like a horror in a way because each story focuses on the violence that women's bodies have faced, whether that's from society or from other people or even from the women themselves. I say that this is the book for the intellectual bitches out there because you really have to think when you read these short stories. So if you're sick of all the fluffy romance books that I've been rating 5 stars and you actually want to read something with substance instead, Her Body and Other Parties is one of the books that I think had a lot of great ideas. It just wasn't for me because it varied between being too vague for my pea brain and being too obvious for my nitpicky brain. A similar book along those lines is a memoir called I'm Afraid of Men. This is a very short book. It's a series of essays that is written by a trans artist who reflects on the ways that masculinity has been imposed on her when she was a boy and the repercussions of what she has to deal with now. There's a lot of interesting points that she talks about throughout the book that I hadn't even considered before, like how we often view men on a binary between good men and bad men, when really human beings are all kinds of gray in between. Another book I read this year that was pretty good was called The Poet X. It's about a young girl in Harlem who discovers herself through slam poetry. It's not as cheesy as I make it out to be. I kind of expected it to be because apparently the whole book is written as poetry, and I was like, oh, I don't know about this. It kind of sounds gimmicky. But honestly, it was actually written pretty well. And I heard that the audiobook is even better if you want to listen to the author narrate the poems herself. The book did a good job of showing the complexities of being a teenager who is finding her voice in a culture that often suppresses the voices of young women. This is the kind of book that any young girl should read because it's a great example of a coming of age novel. But let's say you weren't a young girl. Let's say you're a slightly older girl. What should you read instead? Well, another book that I read along similar lines was The Calculating Stars. This is a historical and sci-fi novel about a main character who is a WASP pilot and a mathematician. Back in the 50s, I believe, there has been a meteorite that fell onto Earth. Basically, Earth is fucked and we gotta find another planet to cohabitate. NASA puts together the space program. It's only composed of men. And so the main girl is like, wait a minute, Why the fuck can't we go in? The story is about her fighting to become the first lady astronaut. Not only did the book go super into detail with all of the aerospace and the history, there was also a huge intersection of how race and gender and mental health were explored among the cast of characters. And I don't even mean it as like, oh, there were a bunch of guys that were mean to the main girl. I'm saying that even the main girl was a fucking ignorant bitch, but she learned, and that is called growth. I did think the writing style was kind of basic. Some of it was a little cheesy, but I still think that the story holds a lot of merit. If I had a daughter, I would want her to read that shit. The next book that I think is good is If We Were Villains. It's basically about a bunch of pretentious theater kids who went to this college 10 years ago. One of the people in their group had been murdered. We are reading this in present day where the main character had been accused of murder even though he didn't actually do it. He tells the detective what really happened 10 years ago. There's a lot of murder and there's a lot of melodrama. And if you are super into plays, you might notice some of the parallels between the events of the book and the plays that they reenact when they were in school. Those are all of the books that I really enjoyed throughout the year. I definitely don't think that these books were objectively amazing or anything like that. Some of them were really fucking good. And then some others, I don't know. They were just books that I happened to like. And it's subjective for everybody. The next video that I will make is about the worst books that I read in 2019. I'm gonna go take a shower now because I cannot stand my smell anymore. Don't forget to unsubscribe because I'm stinky.
You only love me when the lights go down. You only love me when I hang around. You only love me when we get along. You only love me when they play your